Here today, we're doing Apex office hours for Oracle Apex 22.2. This is part 4. We're going to talk about PWA, user and developer experience features. I'm Jason Haynes coming from live from Florida. Let's get going. So some announcements and updates. Oracle Apex 22.2 is now available. You can download Apex 22.2 and install it on-prem and start using all the features yourself. We're just very excited now with this part 4 of Apex office hours to talk about all these new features, because now all of them from the last 3 previous office hours to now are available for you to use in your own environment. From there, Apex 22.2 upgrade on autonomous database is available. So it's rolling out to always free autonomous databases today. To see if your region has Apex 22.2, open Apex Administration Services and check Available Updates Region, or check using the API apex_instance_admin, and there's details in the blog post mentioned at the very bottom here of this slide. From there, we will not auto-upgrade your database today, though. If you want it today, go to Apex Administration Services and click Upgrade Now, or you can wait until this weekend or later this month. It's up to you when you upgrade. Also, we'd like to introduce the OData Connector REST Source plugin. It's now available for download as well. You can download the plugin together with the sample app, which illustrates the plugin usage. So the URL is there on our GitHub. This opens the door for Apex integrating with SAP and Microsoft systems using the OData version 4 industry standard. It's a big step forward for Apex, being able to integrate and use in larger companies and IT landscapes. Together with MTAG, we will introduce this new plugin in the Apex office hour session November 17th. As part of this, MTAG will show how they're using the plugin today to integrate Apex with Microsoft Dynamics. So I'm sure you can relate to that. It's very exciting. So here we are on part 4 of Apex office hours, talking about new features of Apex 22.2. Today, it's going to be PWA, user and developer experience features. As I just mentioned, Apex and OData REST data sources to your service is November 17th. But as always, all office hours are recorded. Editions of Apex 22.2 new features, the marquee features, sneak preview of what's new items and regions, and so forth, are available for you to play on demand from apex.oracle.com/office hours. Also coming up on November 24th is Apex Office Hours en Español. The information is there, and if you go to our Office Hours website, you'll be able to subscribe to that particular session that's coming up next week. So today, we have Vincent Morneau, Anthony Rayner, and Paige Hansen available to discuss PWA user and developer experience features, and it's just going to be very exciting. We're going to have a lot of content today, and having said that, Vincent, let's go ahead and let's start learning a little bit more about PWA and all these awesome features.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm one of the principal developers for Oracle Apex. I work a lot on the PWA features and some of the mobile and UX aspect of Apex. So I'm here today to talk about what we've been doing in Apex 22.2 around PWA and some of the smaller features you might not have noticed, but I want to highlight a few. I'm really excited to discuss what we've been doing in 22.2 for PWA. We've been doing a lot in previous releases. We have plans for the future, but today let's focus on PWA for 22.2. So let's go ahead. I'll share my screen. And before I dive into PWA, I want to highlight 2 smaller features of Apex 22.2. And actually, the first one I want to start with is actually a bug fix. It's very rare that I like to advertise and publicize a bug fix like that, but this one is really nice. So let's start with one of our Apex 22.1 environment. It's a heavy form page with a lot of fields. And this, you might have noticed in your own applications, if you reload your page quickly, you start to see some animations coming. The floating labels are kind of going on top of all the fields, and it's happening on every page load. It's very disturbing. So in 22.2, we've finally fixed this. If you look at one of the form pages, the same heavy form page in 22.2, now as you refresh, it's just instantaneous. There's no animation. For all the form fields that have a value, you will have the label at the correct place. So that's a very nice bug fix that I think is worth highlighting. And then I want to move on to another smaller feature, which is actually a template in Universal Theme that we've added. It's a long requested feature, and we've implemented it as a template, which is called the item container, which allows users now to put a button next to an item and move it really responsively and accordingly to the height of the item. So for instance, what we have here is a search field. And this search field has now a position to put a button before and after the form field. So we have two positions, the button start and button end, and these buttons can be moved from the start position to the center position to the end, and you can also stretch it to match the height of the field. So that from a implementation perspective, you can find this item container as a region, and inside of the region, what you will have is a position for the item and two positions for the button start and end. So I think that's going to be great for developers who want to create search fields and buttons that make sense next to those form fields. Okay, let's jump into PWA. So there's a lot of content for this release. I do want to take a step back and explain how we've approached this for this release. And it's important to note that in previous releases for PWA, we've kind of pushed this concept of trying to install applications on all browsers and all devices. It's not always been easy because some devices and browsers don't really allow PWA installation like others. So take Firefox, for instance. In Firefox, what we would have before is we would force our PWA features into Firefox. And then as users try to interact with those features, we would have a message that says, sorry, this is not supported. Please use Chrome or Edge or whatever. So we were trying to push very hard to steer users into PWA. We think this was a little too much. We took a step back, and now instead of adding the PWA features everywhere, we start by looking at the feature support in the current device and browser. So right now I'm on Firefox, and I no longer see this install PWA. So we respect the user's browser choice, and we will only show the features according to the browser support. So that's a pretty big change in terms of how users will be able to interact with PWA. Some of them will be able to, some others not, but I think that's okay. So let's go back to Chrome now and actually install this PWA. Here. Okay. This sample PWA app is coming in the future. It's not quite ready yet, but I'm going to be using it to demonstrate what we've been doing in 22.2. Let's start by actually installing this application. So I can install my sample application. It goes on my operating system and it reopens in full screen, yada, yada. That's been done before. What we've added this time around is, first of all, we've started to rethink how we present a PWA for the first time to users. So oftentimes users expect to go to app stores and they see a very nice presentation of the application with screenshots and promotional content. So what we've decided to do is redesign the PWA install dialog. If you go to, let's say, iOS, what you see now when installing a PWA is a very nice install dialog that shows you a description of your application and a slidable screenshot set, which gives a preview of what the application is. So this is the same for Android and also Edge on desktop. So we're going to be very careful with all of those features now in the sample PWA to explain what each feature is and the compatibility of all of those features. And then what we've introduced is PWA shortcuts. Similarly to screenshots, shortcuts are accessible in the new PWA page of the shared components. And if you edit your app, what you will see is two new sections. One for adding screenshots. So you have the responsibility of adding your own screenshots, which will display in the PWA dialog. And then we have shortcuts. Shortcuts are basically a list of shortcuts, which allows users to quickly access specific pages of your application. And how this manifests itself is from a desktop perspective. Here you have your PWA application. On a desktop, you can right-click on that application, and you will see the list of shortcuts. So these shortcuts are defined right here. They have a target to a specific page of the application. On a mobile, like Android, what you have is you can do a long press on your application, and you will see the same list of shortcuts. So now I understand that Android limits the list of shortcuts to 4. So it depends on the operating system, of course. So that is from a promotional perspective and the usage of the installed PWA. Now let's move on to new dynamic actions that we've introduced to interact better with mobile devices. So let's go back to our application. So the first dynamic action that we will find is called Get Current Position. It's really a simple dynamic action that you can trigger on a button or from any tappable input. And what it does is it allows you to get and retrieve the geolocation coordinates of the current device. So to illustrate this, it's easier to get the latitude and longitude. How this works is actually very simple. We have a button right here that triggers a dynamic action. And then we have this new dynamic action called Get Current Position. And we are able to define where the latitude and longitude should be returned to. So in our case, it's P1 latitude, P1 longitude. We enable high accuracy. That's one of the options. And we can also pick what kind of return type we will be having. So latitude and longitude is the simplest, but we can also return the whole GeoJSON, which contains altitude and speed and a lot more information. So how this works, let's actually do it on a mobile device, is you would go here and under geolocation, and let's try our dynamic action. So because I've done this test before, it's not asking me for permission. But if this was my first time doing it, I would have a pop-up coming from Safari, and it would ask me for permission to give my coordinates to the browser. So now automatically when I pressed the button, it returned latitude, longitude. You can save this to your database and your columns and so on. Now it's up to you to do whatever you need with those coordinates. So just a simple shortcut to get this kind of data. The second dynamic action that we're introducing is called web share. So the web share is a way for web applications to share links or content or even files to other apps on your system or to other social media platforms. So for instance, in the context of an Apex page, what I would be sharing is this particular URL right here with some text and maybe an image or other sort of content. So like with many other PWA features, this is highly dependent on the browser and device you're using. For some reason, Chrome doesn't. So let's move to, again, we'll go on iOS, Safari. This one does. So what I'm trying to do here is share this content, this text with the world. So I press share. Now it opens up the native share sheet of the device. And what you will find here, if this was a real device, is you would find your contacts and other apps from your phone, and you would be sharing this URL, this text content or those files to other apps. So let's pick the only one that I have, since this is a simulator, and I can share this text and this URL. So that's great. I can now interact Apex apps with other apps. But one of the nice things about sharing is that depending on the app or the platform that you pick for sharing, you will get a link like this. If I just copy this link, and now I move over to, let's say, Twitter, which Twitter expands link and they show preview, and it's very easy to share with Twitter. So now let's go to the home, and I can add a new status, and this is going to be a test live from office hours. And I'm going to be sharing this link, which in the context of Twitter, oh, now interesting, it didn't. So probably something is missing in my text, but let's actually go to my profile because I did this pretty recently. There we go. So this is actually an Apex page now. And what it does from a Twitter perspective is that it expands the image that I specified in my application and the description and the URL. So now it's easy from any Apex page that is public to share data to other platforms. And how we do this from an Apex perspective is that we have, let's go to our share, is that we have declarative meta tags. This is what allows other social media platforms and other apps to expand on your content, is that you have meta tags that define what kind of content are you sharing. Here, I'm sharing a description of my site that is contained in this item. And I'm also sharing an image that lives in my application files. So with these declarative meta tags, you're able to share content really, really easily with Apex now. So to recap, we've added better promotional content for PWAs to make it easier for users to install. We've added new dynamic action to interact with the device. And we've added declarative meta tags for better sharing. And that's a pretty good tour of what we've done in 22.2. So now back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Vincent. That's amazing. I can't wait to start playing with some of these features. Really appreciate it. We have a couple questions, if you don't mind. Plumman has asked, is it possible to rename the service worker SWJS by default?
No. I'd be interested to know why one would want to rename that file, but the answer is no.
Okay, well, he's saying using some external push notification services, they require specific server worker file names.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough.
Love to talk more about that.
All right, next question. Is there a JS API to invoke this same geolocation function? The idea being to avoid defining a dynamic action and doing the whole thing directly in JavaScript.
Absolutely. Those dynamic actions are actually shortcuts to use our APIs. So yes.
All right, very cool. Thank you. If I have two or more apps in my workspace with PWA feature enabled, is it possible to navigate between the two?
Right now, it's not, although it is part of our roadmap. We do want to support this. We think it's important for many systems to be able to break down apps, but still operate as a single PWA. So no for 22.2, but yes for the future.
All right. And Matthias asked the question, is it planned to offer native offline features in Apex?
That is a difficult question to answer because it depends. What does it mean to be offline? Should the entire application be offline, or should we enable parts to be offline? We do want to improve in that area. It is not a trivial feature for Apex. So it's hard to commit right now, but we'd like to improve.
Okay. Another question. Is it possible to auto install the PWA app immediately when the page is run on the browser? I would think no, right? Because it
No.
requires approval.
Yes.
All right. We're going to move on to what Anthony's about to start present with us. Thank you, Anthony, for joining. And Vincent, thanks so much for all your attention to detail there. Let's go with Anthony.
Thank you for joining us on Apex 22.2 release day. It's an exciting day for us. I hope for you too. And yeah, my name is Anthony Rayner. I'm here. I'm one of the main developers on the Apex development team, and primarily look after the accessibility of the product and ensuring that not only the Apex development environment, but also enabling you to build Apex applications which work well for all. So I'm going to talk to you today about one new exciting accessibility focused feature we're bringing to you in 22.2. And then we'll also touch on a separate feature related to template directives. All right, so without further ado, okay, so landmarks. So landmarks are a feature of the ARIA standard. So ARIA is Accessibility for Rich Internet Applications. It's a W3 set of standards designed to kind of fill the gaps that HTML provides and make it more accessible for users of assistive technology like screen readers, for example. So landmarks are a very important part of that ARIA set of standards. And it's really designed to help screen reader users orientate themselves when they first arrive at an Apex page, and also to help get an overview of what's on the page. Just as a visual user would scan the page, a screen reader user, for example, may scan the page using landmarks or other navigation mechanisms. And it also enables a screen reader user to quickly go to those sections and to understand where they are on the page if they've moved there. So it's a sort of a multifaceted, really important part of the standards that help with discovery and orientation of web pages when used with a screen reader. Our support with landmarks has been an ongoing effort in the last few releases. I guess when Universal Theme first came out and we started using HTML5 section elements like main and header and footer, they have implicit landmark support with them. And we've just been building on that support really in the last few releases. In Apex 22.1, or perhaps even 21.2, we added some support to regions within the region template for landmarks. So by virtue of just using Universal Theme region templates, you would get some degree of landmark support within your applications, combined with the Universal Theme page templates. Actually, maybe without even knowing it, you've got some landmark support within your pages. But it was quite restrictive in 22.1 and before. So this new feature is focused on region support. There's other parts of Apex which are also being worked on with regard to landmarks. Interactive reports, for example, in 22.1 got some really nice new landmark support. And we're going to touch on that in part of the demo today. But with regions, what we now provide you is full control at page designer level to control how those regions present as landmarks to the page. You can choose to include them as landmarks. You can choose to exclude them as landmarks. And you're no longer tied to what we do in the template. It was previously hard-coded in the template. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of what landmarks are. Here's the W3 reference page, just for a little bit of further information to give you a feel for what kind of things they are. So, for example, from banner down to search here, these 8 roles are the landmark roles. And it enables you as a developer or as any kind of web author to define certain sections of the page as a search section, as a navigation section, the banner, which is the header, the content info, which is the footer, a form landmark. So screen reader user can go into the page and they can immediately see where these sections of the page are and immediately go to them. And if they're on the page, they can hit like a shortcut in JAWS or whichever screen reader, and they can immediately see where they are. So it's really powerful. And it builds on what HTML provides, which is nowhere close to this kind of expressiveness and semanticness that landmarks afford us. If we have a look at how it looked before, so this is Apex 22.1, a very simple page. I think it's a sample application built on a certain database table. And here we have a dashboard page with a search field and 4 chart regions. We can visualize the landmarks using Chrome DevTools. You don't have to do that anymore in 22.2, but this is the only way I can show you in 22.1. So if we go to DevTools in Chrome, and on the Elements tab, you'll see that there is an accessibility and a landmarks tab. We click on the landmarks tab, and this will actually show us the landmarks on the page. You can hit show all landmarks to visualize these things. Of course, if you're using a screen reader, you can use a screen reader shortcut to be able to see these things as well. For example, in JAWS, it's Control Insert R to show you all of these landmarks on the page. But here we can see how they look. Let's just have a closer look at what we've got. So we've got a banner, which is the header. We've got main navigation, which is actually hidden at the moment. It's the collapsed tree section. There's breadcrumb navigation. There's a main landmark. And then we've got 4 landmarks for these 4 chart sections. A content info, which is the footer. And then we add a landmark around the developer toolbar to allow you to quickly get to that too. So what we are missing here, so if we just do show all landmarks, you can see that the search customers search field is not actually contained within its own landmark. And that is actually an accessibility bug. When you're using landmarks, a best practice is to ensure that all content is within its own landmark. Because if it isn't, it's easy to miss with screen readers. It's like having a map with a location that's not listed on the map. Unless you stumble across it, which a screen reader user can do by manually reading the whole page. So unless you stumble across it, you may never know it exists. So here we've got an issue. We've got this search field, which may be missed with a screen reader user. And if we have a look at this page to see how it's defined, so this is a standard Apex page. We've got the 4 chart regions are all using the standard region template. The search region is actually using a blank with attributes region template. So all perfectly valid, good universal theme usage, but actually because these things are hard coded in the template, we used to make a kind of a best guess at when and when you wouldn't want to have a landmark on the page. But really, it's up to you how you use our templates. It was sort of inherently flawed, that approach, because by hard coding it in the template, although it was sort of a good start, it very often resulted in a page with poorly defined landmarks, missing content, or a landmark where you don't actually want a landmark. I'll show you the template. So if we go to the standard template, look at how that looked in the template. So we're still in 22.1 at the moment. We would have this kind of logic. So role of region and ARIA label with the region title. So hard-coded in the template, it used the region landmark. The region landmark is kind of like the fallback landmark. So where you haven't got a different landmark type, which is more appropriate. So where it's not a search region, it's not a navigation section, it's not a form. Region is like for any other content that you want to include in the landmarks on the page, but it doesn't have that other semantic meaning. Not to be confused with an Apex region, of course. This is a W3 use of the terminology region. Unfortunately, that's overloaded in an Apex context, but just to make that clarification. Okay, so that's the template. That's the page. We could work around this in 22.1. We could add the role and the ARIA label to the region in Page Designer, but we would have to do it custom in Page Designer in the region attributes. And you'd have to know to use role equals region and the ARIA label. So it's cumbersome to work around and certainly not low code, easy, declarative, the Apex way. All right, so let's move on to 22.2. Same page, same problem, new way of understanding the problem. So if you go to the dev toolbar, we now have a show landmarks option and also a show headings, which is another way of representing page structure to screen reader users, for example, is through headings. But we're going to focus on landmarks today. So if we do show landmarks, we get a very similar overlay on the page. The overlay shows us the landmark role, so region, navigation, banner, and where there's a label defined, the label. So in this case, the referenceable logo MIME type. These are the labels for the region. All right, so let's fix this issue in this application. So let's go to page 2. We can go to the search region. And now we have a new section in Page Designer for accessibility. There is a use landmark. At the moment, although it does say use landmark, it doesn't have a landmark in the runtime because the template default is defined not to have a landmark. So in this case, what we can do is override this and we can say, this is a search region. So let's give it a search landmark role. And let's also give it a custom title. So it's good practice to avoid using the landmark role in the label. So rather than do search customers, what I would recommend would be to do just customers as the landmark label. And let's see how that looks in the runtime. So if we run the page, we can now see that we have customers search. So a screen reader user, when they're navigating these landmarks, would hear customers search. And if they've just arrived at that page, they may wish to start there because they want to perform a search on customers. They can immediately get to that page section very easily. Similarly, if you wish to exclude something from the landmarks on the page, which in this case doesn't make much sense, but say this region was some kind of layout region that was just used to kind of organize things in Page Designer, for example, you don't really want to expose that as a landmark on the page because it just adds to the noise of what's experienced from screen reader users. So in this case, if we go to the referenceable region, and what we can do is we can say use landmark, no, save, and run. And it's now excluded from that on the page. Something to mention is you do need to refresh to the most recent version of Universal Theme to be able to use this new support. The new region templates of Universal Theme in 22.2 now include this new region landmark attributes substitution string. That needs to be defined in the template in order for those attributes to actually be visible in Page Designer. You wouldn't see them if you're using a region template that doesn't include that substitution string. So you will need to refresh your universal theme after upgrading to 22.2. So in 22.2, with this show landmarks feature available, it persists when you move around the application. So for example, if you go to this report, we can see the landmarks overlay. We can select to open a modal dialog page. And because the dev toolbar support hooks into the events of Apex, we can update the appearance of those landmarks as you're moving through the UI as a developer. So it really does help to do those sort of visual checks to ensure that you've got good landmarks defined. All right. More will come in the future with landmarks. It's an ongoing effort. All of our new components are being reviewed for landmarks. The new date picker, for example, has some landmarks built in. And yeah, so watch this space with the landmark support, but I hope you find the new region support useful. Oh, just to mention as well, a couple of things. There is a new section in the accessibility guide that talks about this. If you go to the developing accessible apps section, there's a page structure section, and all of this support around landmarks is explained in this documentation, including some tips for defining good landmarks. When you need a label, the kind of structure of how the landmark should be, you're only allowed one of certain landmark types, and some guidelines around naming. And there's also a bunch of help text available in Page Designer on each of those new attributes. So when you go to, for example, one of these regions, and we have a look here and enable help, there's some good information in there, some guidelines on naming, for example. So yeah, hopefully you find that useful. All right, I'm going to spend 2 more minutes on a different feature within Apex 22.2, which is new template directive support built into interactive and classic report regions. If you're not familiar, template directives is a syntax that we've introduced within Apex some releases ago. It enables you to add logic to HTML. So previous support was, I think, for interactive grids and card regions, and the functionality was client side. So actually it was documented in the JavaScript API under the apply template function. And there's a section here on directives and this kind of flexible logic that you can put into HTML to add conditionality to what you're emitting. It adds to the kind of quality of the markup you can emit and makes it much more powerful. So this was previously missing from any kind of server-side logic, but now it has been added to the server-side processing of interactive and classic reports within the HTML expression properties of a column of interactive and classic reports. So what it allows you to do is, for example, you can display different content depending on the value. So for example, here we've got different text strings displaying depending on whether the commission field is null, whether it's not null but not zero, or whether it's zero. In the URL column, you can see how we render links conditionally based on whether the URL is not null. So previously, maybe you do this in the SQL statement or the source of the report. You no longer have to do that. You can do it in the HTML expression. So it kind of cleans up the region source, allows you to keep that kind of conditional logic out of the region source, but put it into the HTML expression for the column. And also this example where it's a colon delimited list of values, and we use a template directive to transform it into tags. So if I show you how this looks, so if we go here and let's have a look at the URL column, for example. So in the HTML expression field, you'll see this kind of directive syntax where you've got the directive statement. In this case, it's saying if the URL is not null, then we want to omit the URL in a link. So it has if capabilities, tags shows a loop and an if. So if tags, then loop over the tags and omit them in a list item. And then there's a CSS class being added to the unordered list to enable styling on this particular page. And there's case capability as well to have inline case statements within your logic. So yeah, so brand new in template brand new and classic and interactive reports, server-side processed, and hopefully more to come in the future with template directive support. So yeah, that's it. Back to you, Jason.
Anthony, I mean, that's just amazing that those template directives are so super cool. Is there any plan for any kind of UI that would allow us to build those kind of expressions without having to hand type it all?
It's a great question. I don't know of any plans at the moment. I don't know if anyone else could chime in on the Q&A, but yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful to have some sort of UI over that, but I know of no immediate plans for that, Jason.
And a question on the landmarks. I mean, just as myself as a ignorant developer who's learning about accessibility in general, is there a point of diminishing returns if we just enable everything with landmarks? Like, should we avoid doing it in some cases, or just go hog wild and have everything with a landmark?
Yes, there is a tipping point for sure.
Okay.
It's something that you want to be outlined to the screen reader user when they arrive at the page. So, the terrible user experience would be someone has to read through every element on the page, which is what they might have to do if there's no landmarks and no headings. And if you've got sort of 100 landmarks on the page, you lose the benefits of it because there's so much. So yeah, use mindfully. But for regions, it's a perfect use case because, typically regions are distinct sections of a page that you do wish to be highlighted in that way when a user arrives at the page.
Excellent.
It's something like when you scan the page visually and you see, okay, there's that chart, or there's a search field. It's like what you pick up visually probably within the first 3 seconds of looking at the page. It's that kind of information rather than, reading through.
All right. Is all this like Vlad approved? We have Vlad who's on our Apex developer team, and he's blind and uses JAWS. And then it's just super cool that he's able to help us make Apex even more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vlad has championed the use of landmarks, and it's really down to him that we're pushing with our landmark support. So he describes, a page with good landmarks is, equivalent to him being cited again because he can immediately scan the page in the same way that we would. So yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Anthony, for your time on this. Now we're turning it over to Paige, and yeah, let's go ahead and learn a little bit more about some of the developer experience improvements in Apex 22.2. And just a point of clarification, it was Vlad Goncharov that is now on our Apex team that is hard to cite, and he uses JAWS for interacting and developing Apex features, as a matter of fact, in addition to working with the accessibility features. So we're very excited to have him on our team, helping us make Apex more and more accessible. So sorry about the delay, Paige. Let's go ahead and get started with some of those new features.
Thanks, Jason, and great demos, both Anthony and Vincent. That was awesome. All right, let me get started. So my name is Paige Hansen. I'm a developer on the Apex team, and I'm going to be demoing a couple of features related to dynamic actions that are new in 22.2 and will really enhance the developer experience. So the first one I want to highlight is naming actions of dynamic actions. What this means is I have this page in Page Designer, and I have a few dynamic actions, some content on this page. And by default, all the actions of my dynamic actions are given the name of the action type. So here I have show and hide, refresh, cancel dialog. And that's how things have worked in Page Designer in Apex for a long time. And it's fine, but it can get confusing if you have a lot of dynamic actions on the page and a lot of actions doing similar things. At a quick glance here, I have 2 show actions associated with this job change to salesman dynamic action. I have 2 show actions, 2 hide actions. I got a single refresh action on the page. And right off the bat, unless I really drill into each of these actions, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, what regions, what items they're associated with. And for all I know, they could be duplicates. And so in 22.2, developers now have the ability to give custom names to define a name for each one of these actions. So here on the right in the property editor, we have this new name property, which is above the action property. In the rendering tree, we can see that each one of these actions has the name of the action property. But I really want to be specific about what each of these show and hide actions do to make it crystal clear to myself and potentially other developers what these actions are doing, what regions and items they're associated with. So I can rename this show action to show P2Com. And I'm going to do something similar with my second show action, which is associated with the commissions region. And I know that commissions is a chart region. So I'm going to set the name to show commissions chart. And as soon as I set those names, I can see that they're updated in the rendering tree. And so now if I were to come back to this page, or if another developer is going to come to this page, all they have to do is take a quick glance at these actions to know exactly what they're doing. And they kind of tell a story, right? As soon as the job changes to salesman, it's going to show P2Com and show the commissions chart. If the job is anything else other than salesman, it's going to hide some regions, some items. So I need to update these two actions as well. And I'm going to update them to hide P2Com and hide commissions chart. So very easy, very straightforward. Quick glance right here. I know exactly what these actions are doing. It's crystal clear to me. No questions asked. Easy for me to come back in the future. So that's real quick. First feature, very helpful and should be very useful for complicated pages where you have lots of actions, a lot of content, a lot of regions, doing a lot of custom things. If you have execute JavaScript actions, execute JavaScript as a name doesn't tell you much. And so by setting a name, it's very easy to tell what those actions are going to be doing. All right. So second enhancement that's been made to dynamic actions is making it possible to control the timing of actions. So up until this point, all dynamic actions execute immediately as soon as the event is triggered. And unless you've written some custom code to delay those actions, it executes immediately right off the bat. In 22.2, we've made some adjustments in the property editor for dynamic actions. First of all, we have renamed the execution options property group to just execution, and we've added this type property. And as we can see here, type is set to immediate. This is the default value when you create a new action, or if you're upgrading to 22.2 and have existing dynamic actions, all of them will be set to immediate. And this means that, so here in this situation, once the change event is triggered, any of these actions that I have are going to be executed immediately. So content is either going to be shown or hidden immediately. Now, developers have the opportunity and the option to debounce or throttle their actions. And we're going to take a look at what this means. But here in the page designer, in the property editor, if I select debounce or throttle, you also have two new properties available, both time and immediate. Time is the delay that is associated with the debounce and throttle types. And immediate, this flag is going to determine whether or not an action is debounced immediately, executes immediately, and then the delay happens, or the delay happens first and then the action is executed after the delay. So we have updated the sample dynamic actions app in 22.2. I don't know if this is available quite yet in the gallery, but it is available on GitHub. And we have made some updates, including adding this debounce and throttle page. Now, if I click on this page, you can find this on the home page of the sample dynamic actions app. We get a quick overview of what debounce and throttle do and the options associated with each, along with a few examples of, when you might want to use some of these. So if you're not already familiar with debounce and throttle, debouncing an action will action a single time after a specified delay. And this happens from the last time the action event was triggered. So if an action is triggered once and continues to be triggered, it will execute X amount of time after that last triggered event. Debounce is executed once. Throttle gets executed in intervals. So if an action is throttled, it will execute one time immediately and then continue in intervals so long as the event continues to fire. There's a quick example on this page. I have this text box, and if I type in this text box, each of these display only items will update appropriately based on the associated debounce or throttle execution type. So if I type, this is my debounce and throttle test, I can see how each one of these items updates. Immediate is updating right away. We can see both the throttle types are updating in intervals. And this debounce, it updated right at the end, couple seconds after I finished typing. So great. Let's look at maybe what a common example of using this in an application would be. So I have this application here, and I am able to search movies. I have a search field and a list of movies. And if I start typing in the search field, what I have is I have a key release dynamic action. And when I release a key, it's going to refresh this movie's region with whatever search value I've typed in. On the right, let's keep an eye on this as I type so that we can see the number of requests that are made with each key release. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for Harry Potter. And I can see the number of requests that are made as I'm typing. So as I continue to type, it's making a request with every key release. So that's not really efficient. If I have a lot of content on the page, I could end up making a lot of really expensive requests, and that's not ideal. So this is a great situation in which we can use debounce with a delay, so that the movie's region will only update and refresh once I am done typing. So I'm going to go into Page Designer. And I have this refresh movies dynamic action on key release. It's updating the movie's region. So the type is set to immediate. Let's change this to debounce. I'm going to set the time to maybe a little longer than I usually would, about half a second right now, so that we can really see the effects of debounce. And I'm going to save and run this page. So now let me clear this out again. Now we should not see any requests until I am done typing for half a second. So let's search for Harry Potter again. And there we go. After I'm done typing for half a second, it finally makes that request. I get my movie results. And this is much better behavior than every single time I'm typing a letter. If I put this down to 200 milliseconds. Now, if I hesitate a little bit while I type, I'll get some results every now and then while I'm typing. So let's type Lord of the Rings. And I'm not getting as many requests as the immediate type, but I am getting some requests as I continue to type. So that's just a quick example, very simple example. Hopefully everyone will find this useful. And I think this has been something that people have asked for before on the Ideas app. Jason, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Paige, so much for all these new feature demonstrations, everybody. This has been fabulous. I'm very excited about Apex 22.2. So again, thank you, Vincent and Anthony and Paige. So real quick in closing, today's Apex 22.2 upgrade on autonomous database is available for all users of always free autonomous databases. And the other thing to note about that is this is the first time we are making this new release available to autonomous database at the same time as being generally available for download. So it's just very exciting that we're able to do that for the first time. Just a reminder, in conferences, we've had a lot going on since the pandemic has been over. Came back from North Carolina for EcoFall 2022, and it was a great experience. Met a lot of new people using and interested in learning more about Apex, and there's more to come. From there, I want to remind everyone of the Apex Ideas app at apex.oracle.com/ideas. It's not just for you submitting ideas, it's also for you to check out what the community is interested in. You can go there, review ideas, leave comments, vote for an idea, or randomly look through the whole list of ideas that are out there and weigh in and see what's going on, what everyone's interested in. Just to show everyone, here's an example of those shoes. This looks pretty fancy, not bad, just for fun. Hey, they are the shoes. I got them. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. The Ideas app, also just to know that as Paige mentioned, the simple fact that a lot of good ideas are still coming in from the Ideas app. 23.1 is going to be around the corner in the spring of next year, and look forward to seeing so many more new ideas being made into the product. In any case, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Had a great time listening to all the new material, and look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about the OData connector with MTAG. So see you next time, everyone. Thank you.